I would like to invite would be my friend Dr. James, who is a senior fellow at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies at Singapore, Nanyang Technology University. He has written numerous papers and published on his blogs, and I've been following him for the past few years, and now we are friends. Dr. James.
Thank you, Ahmed. Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege and an honor to be here, and a delight to be back in Kuala Lumpur. I've been asked to focus attention on the role and the position of Saudi Arabia. And as was implicitly evident in the remarks of the Prime Minister this morning, one cannot see what is happening in Yemen independently of the broader trends and developments in the Middle East. So bear with me if I at times digress from the narrow focus on Yemen. These are tough times for Saudi Arabia. Obviously, the drama enveloping the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi and the brutal way in which it was carried out have captured public attention. In reality, however, Saudi Arabia's real problems began with its conduct of the Yemen war. Saudi interference in Yemen that culminated in military intervention predates the four-year-old war. Yemen has long been perceived as a threat by Saudi Arabia. That threat went far beyond current Iranian support for the Houthis. In fact, it was changing Saudi attitudes towards the Houthis and Saudi Arabia's global campaign to promote anti-Shiite, anti-Iranian strands of ultra-conservative Sunni Muslim Islam that paved the way for the current Yemen crisis. It is only half a century ago that the Houthis were part of a Saudi effort to confront Arab nationalism. As an aside, Saudis and Israelis cooperated already then, with Israeli military aircraft dropping weapons for the Saudi-backed rebels that included the Houthis. Saudi-Houthi relations deteriorated just after the turn to this century, when the Saudis funded the opening of a Salafi center on the outskirts of the Houthi capital Sa'ada as part of their more than 4-decade-long $100 billion campaign to promote ultra-conservatism globally. The center constituted not only a challenge to the Houthis as such, but also to the power of the traditional Houthi leadership. It successfully appealed to the socially disadvantaged, as well as youth who were attracted to Salafism's egalitarianism and resented the power of the older generation and saw Puritan Islam as a vehicle to change the traditional hierarchy. Fear of the Wahhabi Salafi encroachment fueled the Houthis' armed resistance against the Saudis, which ultimately led to the kingdom's military intervention in Yemen in March 2015. To counter the threat, the leadership of the Houthis, Zaidis, who are Shiites with practices more akin to Sunni Muslim ritual, turned to Iran for support in religious education, a development that further angered the kingdom and laid the groundwork for a war that has devastated a country that already ranked as one of the world's poorest. I would argue that the Saudi intervention was about more than just confronting an alleged Iranian proxy on its doorstep. For one, if anything, it was the intervention that really drove the Houthis and Iranians closer to one another. Even so, Houthis remain an opportunity, or an Iranian opportunity, in a far broader Saudi-Iranian rivalry rather than a strategic target. And not only an Iranian opportunity. As President Trump prepares to meet the leader of North Korea, a secret United Nations report suggests that North Korea, operating through a Syrian arms dealer, is also arming the Houthis. The Salmans, the king and his son, have since coming to office, and despite the emergence of Trump, taken to new heights a far more assertive foreign and military policy that was crafted by their predecessors in response to the popular Arab revolts in 2011. Make, however, no mistake, Saudi Arabia's new assertiveness is not a declaration of independence from the United States, even if the kingdom is expanding its international relations, as is evident in Prince Mohammed's presence this week in Asia. On the contrary, Mohammed made that very clear in multiple interviews. His goal is to force the United States to re-engage in the Middle East as the best guarantor for regional stability. The Saudis appear to be operating on the basis of Karl Marx's Verelendungstheorie. Things have to get worse to get better. That is part of the backdrop of the stalled military intervention in Yemen. Dangling Iran as the real threat emanating from Yemen serves the Saudis' purpose. In doing so, Saudi Arabia has proven to be ruthless. It is a ruthlessness that is driven by a perception that Iran poses an existential threat to Saudi Arabia. In fact, that may not be incorrect. Certainly from the perception of the monarchy and its ruling family. Saudi Arabia dazzles with the billions of dollars gained from oil exports that it is able to invest overseas, and the investment opportunities it creates in the kingdom itself. But the truth of the matter is that the long-term future of Saudi Arabia is not that of a regional hegemon, but of a second fiddle state. Saudi regional leadership, even if it has been tarnished in Yemen in military and reputational terms, amounts to exploitation of a window of opportunity rather than reliance on the assets and power needed to sustain it. Saudi Arabia's interest is to extend the window of opportunity for as long as possible. That window of opportunity exists as long as the obvious regional powers, Iran, Turkey, and Egypt, are in various degrees of disrepair. Moreover, punitive economic sanctions and international isolation take care of Iran for now. And that is what bites. Iran may not be Arab and maintains a sense of Persian superiority, but it has, like Turkey and Egypt, the assets Saudi Arabia lacks: a large population base, an industrial base, a huge domestic market, a battle-hardened military, a deep-rooted culture, a history of empire, and a geography that makes it a crossroads. Mecca and money will not be able to compete. Add to this two factors. The Islamic regime in Iran came to power in a revolution that preceded the 2011 Arab revolts by 32 years. Moreover, the Iranian Revolution toppled a monarch, not a president, and an icon of US power in the Middle East. Perhaps more importantly, if one disregards the sanctioning of Iran, it is Iran, rather than Saudi Arabia, that is likely to shape the energy architecture in the future of Eurasia. Oil, in terms of demand, is a diminishing commodity. If the long-term future is renewables, the medium term will be shaped by gas. Iran has gas. Saudi Arabia does not, at least not the kind of gas it can export. In fact, Iran has the world's second largest gas reserves. Again, disregarding the sanctions, Iran would have in the next 5 years 24.6 billion cubic meters available for annual piped exports beyond its current supply commitments. If I am correct, and Iran poses an existential threat to the rule of the Al Saud family that it cannot eliminate and at best contain with the support of the United States, the question is what Saudi Arabia's goal in Yemen is, as well as its broader rivalry with Iran. I would not disagree with those who argue that Saudi Arabia's goal in Yemen may have initially been the rollback of Houthi advances with their occupation of the Yemeni capital Sana'a and large parts of Yemen, destruction of Houthi power, and forcing them into a situation in which they would have to accept a Saudi-dictated end to the war. 4 years into the war, that is clearly not a realistic goal. Short of that, the question is how sincere Saudi, and for that matter, United Arab Emirates' interest is in finding a way out of the war. In my mind, short of outright victory, Saudi Arabia would want to keep Yemen weak and the Houthis militarily on the defensive. That is at best only sustainable in the short term. Fact of the matter is that the reputational damage Saudi Arabia has suffered is starting to hurt. Witness measures taken by the US Congress and Germany's decision to halt arms sales to the kingdom. Conflicts are only ended, if not resolved, if the pain of continuing the conflict is greater than the pain of ending it. In Yemen, Saudi Arabia could well be nearing that inflection point. The problem is that even if the United Nations and Swedish-mediated peace talks ultimately produce an end to the war, Yemen, if anything, will pose in the post-war era an even greater and more real threat. Yemen, for much of the post-World War II history, has been an afterthought in the international community, if it sparked a thought at all. Yet, what a post-war Yemen will represent is a devastated country that largely needs to be rebuilt from scratch, a country whose traumatized population has suffered one of the world's worst humanitarian disasters and will need all the aftercare that goes with that. Beyond the taking care of the most immediate humanitarian issues, there is little reason to believe that investors and governments with massive aid packages will be knocking on Yemen's doors. Like in Syria and Yemen, the risk is the emergence of a generation that has nothing to look forward to, nothing to lose, and that deeply resents what Saudi Arabia has done to their country. If Saudi Arabia long saw Yemen as the Gulf's most populous nation with a battle-hardened military that needed to be managed, that new generation is likely to put flesh on the skeleton. It's not a pretty picture to look forward to, and it is one in which the damage has already been done. Having said that, it's never too late to try to limit the damage, if not reverse affairs. That, however, would take the kind of courage and vision that Prince Mohammed and others in power in Saudi Arabia have yet to demonstrate. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Yeah, that's a little bit about the